around in those days too. Quite a bit more difficult to hunt because of the terrain they live in, and so I would suspect that they were a much smaller part of the annual diet for the people in those days. And then, of course, there's numerous other species that might have been, come into their diet if the opportunity presents itself. Lots of small game, grouse and rabbits, and of course, there's I'm sure there were black bears and grizzly bears at that time too. Now, most hunters hunting with a bow and arrow would probably have avoided the grizzly bear for obvious reasons. I think the odd black bear may well have gone into the stew pot at one time or another. And of course, all that meat is tremendously valuable to a person who's in need of some protein. And some of us prefer not to eat some of the predators today, but I don't think they were terribly fussy back in the 1800s. So that gives you a rough idea of where we've come from. We can jump forward one century into the 1900s. Coincidentally, the Ronan brothers settled in Pemberton Meadows in the early 1900s. I think the sign on Clifford and Joe's place says established 1906. So by then things has started to change considerably from the perspective of the province as well as the local valley here. The province of BC formed their first game commission in 1905 and appointed the famous Brian Williams to head that up. So it was clear, even in those early years in 1905, that there was some concern about conservation, and we didn't want to follow the pattern that they'd used out on the prairies, for instance, where the bison were eliminated. There needed to be some controls, and so they brought in a commissioner to handle that. Coincidentally, he had no staff and no budget, and relied a lot on volunteers to help him out with his job. And frankly, that hasn't changed a lot. It's in some ways it's quite similar today. The bag limits that were established back in those days, I just glanced at some of the statistics before I came over here. Very, very liberal bag limits. So they were still giving someone who was capable of hunting the opportunity to collect meat for a very large family, or perhaps even a small neighborhood, because they allowed 10 deer a year, plus, what is it? We've got it down here, 3 caribou, 3 mountain sheep, 5 goats, a couple of bull moose, and a couple of bull elk. You could never eat all that meat. So it would depend where you were located if those species were available. So as I mentioned, the deer and the mountain goats would be the most likely to get here, and you were allowed a very, very liberal quota. That, again, would begin to change as more and more settlers moved into the valley, and the rifles took over from the bow and arrows and became far more efficient. So as time's gone by and the human population has built up, clearly the regulations need to change, and everybody in the hunting world today has to get a hold of his yearly hunting and trapping synopsis, and this is where all the rules and regulations are written down today. So in 1905, I would suggest that this would have been 1 page at most. Today it's a small book, and that's how they keep things under control today. George mentioned that the valley has changed a lot since the coming of European settlers, and clearly that's because of the diking and drainage program that we've undertaken to basically make the valley habitable for humans. Unfortunately, there has been a downside to that as far as fish and wildlife goes, because we've lost a tremendous amount of habitat, particularly the wetland habitats on the valley floor and the rearing areas for coho salmon and cutthroat trout. So that's unfortunate, but that's the way things go.